Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. There's going to be a bit of context today. There is a lot of stuff I want to talk about regarding the band itself and some cool information about it, but if you just want to get straight to the reaction, there are timestamps in the description, as is usual for all the videos. Today's selection comes at us from Bertel, who wanted me to check out Abstrusa Unde, Suune Kvalta. It's a progressive symphonic black metal band that sounds like nothing I've ever heard before and left me completely speechless. So the name of the band, Abstrusa Unde, is actually Latin for obstructed whence. Now, Bertel also contacted me on Bandcamp to let me know about some extra information here. The violin, cello, and clarinet are all real instruments played by real people in the band. Additionally, the band was founded in '07. It was the result of a quest for several musical style integrations into a single entity. The project was initially built to record a 70-minute musical piece based on the Orpheus myth, exploring various musical landscapes from electro jazz to black metal. It included guitar, drums, keyboards, male and female singers, and also classical instruments like violins and cellos. Now, this already sounds fantastic. However, after 2 years of work, the project was just a bit more than they could complete, and they abandoned it. Unfortunately, I would have loved to hear what they work on, even if it was like rough demos. The whole project just sounds phenomenal, but it's also exceptionally ambitious, and I don't fault them at all for hitting a roadblock or maybe multiple roadblocks and saying, 2 years of work, we don't really have much to show or whatever. I don't think this is going to work. There are excerpts from this that were recorded on a demo in June of '08. Oh, I probably should have read that next line. I gotta look for those excerpts. After a few lineup changes, though, they're back. They work on new compositions that are a little less complex technically, but still favor the mixing of multiple influences. This comes off of their first full-length album, Introspection, and they're continuing this idea that they're developing here in their next album. So, yeah, there's a lot of really interesting things going on with this band. And, before we even get into this, I just want to say how cool it is to hear a band say, we put a lot of work into something and it wasn't working, so we shifted gears. Even disbanding for a while before coming back to it. And I think that's a really important message, especially for people new to music, is that not everything is going to pan out. And we hear so many very ambitious and even influential albums throughout time, and there's probably 10 times, 100 times as many projects that never get shipped. They never get finished. It is a reality of music, and I love the story here. If we tried something too ambitious for us, we bit off more than we could chew, and we had to take a break and come back to things and reevaluate. So, with all that said, let's dive into this track from Abstrusa Unde and see what's going on with them. We counted off in 4. Oh no, we're still in 4. It was just weird to count off in 4 and then start the track in triplets. I love that guitar lick. Or actually, it's a melody, isn't it? Beautiful. Especially as counterpoint to the vocals. Getting that triplet feel in there again. It wouldn't surprise me if everything we've heard so far is in 12/8. Because it would facilitate everything so well. What is that? Blackened symphonic death metal. That's what I'm getting out of this. This section always hits so hard. I don't know why. It's so I think it's because we come out of the black metal, which is hyper rigid, into this syncopated bit. Plenty of dissonance as well in the string section. That vocal melody is bonkers. Dang! We're already halfway through it? Yeah, time's flying. I'm enjoying myself here. So much power. What an ingenious idea. That drumming, golly. Well, not my favorite ending. A little long in the tooth, but you know, I can forgive it for the rest of the track. This is definitely something I'm gonna have to check more of out on my own, simply because, I mean, yeah, it's not like anything I've ever heard. I mean, man, is it though? It's got symphonic metal elements. It has death metal vocals, operatic vocals, and symphonic style black metal stuff, which I know we've checked out a band who does that, and I can't think of what it is. But have I heard it in this combination? No. I've heard bits and pieces of stuff like this, but I'd say overall this is rather unique to my ears. It's a shame it came out in 2012, and they were talking about putting another album out, and have they? No. They have just the solo album out. And that demo does not exist on their Bandcamp either. Well, on the flip side, there's like a 40-minute album here that I've got to dig into. All right, so what's going on here though? We kind of have the song split up into two moments. We have the symphonic metal sections, which does not always include guitars. I think that's a really interesting distinction from most symphonic metal, is that the strings are the important part, as well as the clarinet. And what else is there? That's it, right? Yep, violin, cello, and clarinet. Interestingly, the violinist is the only one that was part of the band at the time. The cello and clarinetist were session instruments, session musicians. I'm trying to see if there was any synth work in here at all. Doesn't look like it though. But yeah, we start off the track with operatic vocals. We have the strings and the woodwinds together, and I don't think we had any bass or guitar for a while. We bring in the operatic vocals, and we just have this pretty traditional symphonic, like a small, an odd trio quartet. I'm sure somebody's done it before, but violin, cello, clarinet, and operatic vocals is not something I can say I've heard too often as a solo quartet. But we eventually do bring in some guitar, drums, bass into this section as well. But I think, like I said, that's the distinction there, is that the original quartet, the non metal aspects, are what drive this forward. It's where our lead melodies can be found, it's where all of the harmonic concepts are held within. It's everything right there. When the guitars come in to fill it out, that's what they are. They're all secondary roles to what's going on there. It isn't until we get to the B style, which is the metal section. We have the tremolo picking on the guitars for texture, and chord progression, and the drums are just double bass kick constantly, and the vocals shift to those growls. And then we see the inverse of this, in that the metal instruments are what's key to the section, and the strings are outside of that, primarily being chordal information. And at that point, it feels very much like black metal with some strings around it. There are some other sections throughout the track that we visit, sometimes sparsely. We quickly move through them. And they're kind of grab bags. They don't really fit into one or the other, and they kind of toe the line, bringing both sides more together. But the A and the B section that we just discussed are frequently explored in this track, in a sense that they're also the only ones that are repeated, and they're so heavily skewed to one side or the other that they feel polar opposite. And it's really interesting hearing them back to back. One of those sections that crops up every once in a while is that super syncopated one that came after our first two metal sections. And what was going on with that? Um, it's kind of fun. It's kind of eclectic. Kind of has an avant-garde element to it, in that there isn't a real clear rhythmic component. There isn't a real clear melody. It just has this really heavy syncopated rhythm that pushes hard against the the heartbeat of the song, and it's such a fun section. And like I said, it coming after the black metal part, which is rigid. It's just constant 16th notes. It feels intentionally placed, but also, once again, a polar opposite. We move, it's interesting too, is because we start with the strings, where metal isn't that important. Then we flip it and we go to the metal section where the strings are semi important, but they're duplicating a role. And then we go to this section, which is another polar opposite, but this one rhythmically. We move from solid 16th notes to something heavily syncopated. And so that's an interesting pattern. I don't think it progresses through most of the song, having this idea of a component being a polar opposite, but it definitely happens enough that I can't ignore that. And so, like, listening to this track, that tends to be where my mind goes, is either listening to some really complex melodic writing, heavy use of counterpoint, interesting harmonic ideas, heavily layered, in a sense of layering individual ideas to craft a nuanced, larger one, versus having to completely flip how I listen to the music, and the layering has shifted from a bunch of unified ideas to, or sorry, a bunch of singular ideas to a unified idea, where we tend to look at texture more so than melody, and we look at a wall of sound more so than individual layers. And yeah, okay, that actually does pop up a lot through this track. They sort of have two modes, where it's more of classical writing or black metal writing. Densely layered wall of sound or densely layered multiple moving individual sections. What's really interesting is the black metal section isn't bad. Um, if you're new to the channel, I hope that didn't come out the wrong way. I'm just not a real big fan of black metal. And so when I listen to a black metal section, I'm like, yeah, okay, I could listen to this. Like, that is a huge flag for me that I'm listening to something interesting. Taking the core ideas of black metal and manipulating it in a way that appeals to me somehow. It's rare. And so I find it fascinating when it happens. And this track ends up feeling very classical in the way that it's built then. Because we do have recurring motifs, but a majority of the track is linear. We have several sections that show up only once, but there are two sections that we repeatedly call back. And this idea of uh, bringing back motifs, even in brand new contexts, is very classical. We don't really have what I would call a verse chorus structure here. I don't even know if I want to call these recurring motifs a verse or a chorus. It's quite possible that they are thought of that way by the composer, but at least for me, they're classical motifs, and it's interesting to see a song juggle two of them. It's not unheard of, but it's definitely a bit rarer in the world of classical. But they don't ever come after each other in a way that would make me think they have a verse chorus pairing. And I really love that. it's a bit outside the box and a little difficult to do well, but at the end of the day, I picked it up. After a single listen, I was like, oh, these are motifs. They're calling back to them. And then we also get recontextualizations, like at the end when we revisited our intro, but then brought in the operatic vocals and the harmonization of it from the verse rather than shifting the intro music to the verse music. And that was our outro. And like, that was a very cool idea of bringing back an idea and pairing it with a motif in a completely different context. Like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The composition here is exceptionally strong, which also kind of gives the black metal section context, which is one of my big issues with black metal, is that it tends to just be constant wall of noise, 16th notes, and without context, it just is constantly. And since I'm not a big fan of the sounds, I have a real tough time with it. But here, not only do we break that sound up and present other rhythmic ideas, other harmonic ideas, other timbres around it, but interestingly, it becomes a contrast against other ideas as well. It isn't so much about making it bearable in contact to other concepts, but actually what it brings to the table opposed to what comes around it, and what the 16th constant 16th notes, what the shifting to the wall of sound concept, what the growls all might mean in the larger context of the song. Yeah, I can get behind that. I mean, I've even done that myself, utilizing 16th note, constant 16th notes in some of my works after being, after tossed into the deep end of black metal. It's one of the things that I've picked up that is a very useful technique to use. If I don't use it the same way a black metal guitarist might or a drummer might, I still like the technique, and I think it has its place in all music. And I think this is a really good example of how you can utilize even pure black metal writing within a larger work to be its own thing and to provide extra information to the larger work. Yeah, this was just amazing. It's incredibly dense too. Like I wish I could get more into some of the nuance of it. Um, oh, there is one nuanced idea I want to talk about because this was this was awesome. So there's this one line. It was a clarinet duet, I think, and there's only one clarinetist, so I'm sure it was just recording two different parts. But it was interesting because we had this descending line, like do 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 do, and it was pretty large, covered an octave and a half, maybe two octaves, um, in the right side, and about three-quarters of the way into it, we got the same run on the left side. And then they kind of lined up and started to work together and then went their own separate ways. And it was just this constant conversation. Sometimes they would overlap, sometimes they would do call and response, sometimes they would repeat what the other one said, and sometimes they'd be off on their own little worlds. And it was just a fascinating moment of the song. And it makes me wish that I had maybe been able to pick up some other ideas that we had heard like this. I don't know if it was just the only one of its kind in this track specifically, or if maybe there were some details I missed in the other sections, but it was so effortlessly implemented into the song that I can't believe it was a one-time thing and they're never going to revisit it. And like I said, maybe it's just not in this track, but there's a lot of other music on this album that I like to wait a second. So this track is 8 minutes long, eight and a half, eight and a quarter. On their Bandcamp, it's 15:20, but it has more to it. It's called Suune Kvalta, in parentheses, plus 4.12.12.12.1. So I'm guessing there is another bonus track possibly at the end of it. I don't know. It's got me intrigued though. I'm gonna have to check it out later. Yeah. I would look up lyrics on this, but here's something really neat. On sonichits.com, somebody was asking for the lyrics to this song, and the bassist replied to them and said, most of the vocal parts are written in an invented language inspired by Lisa Gerrard and the band Magma. So, if you needed another reason to love this group and what they were doing, they have Magma inspirations, at least on the lyrical side. It's just. Yeah, so there's not going to be a lyrical dissection because it's all made up. But here's the thing though, right? Is it made up gibberish words or is it an invented language that actually has meaning to it? Could it be translated into English, for instance? I'm kind of curious about that. Because I do know that some bands just use gibberish language. It's an invented language. It's not meant to have any one-to-one translational element to it. But, you know, you never know. So I'm kind of curious about that. Those are my thoughts on Abstrusa Unde's Suune Kvalta. Let me know what you thought of this one. Let me know if you want to check out more. Um, I don't usually do this except for creator requests, but I will be adding the Bandcamp link to the description alongside a link to this video, specifically because I know there's going to be some people who want to dig into this further, and I might as well reduce the friction to doing that. I'll just give you a quick link to go listen to more. All right. As usual, let me know your comments about this in the comment section. The description box has a link to Linktree in it. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, link to the Discord server, ways to support the channel, and a ton else. Go ahead and check that out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, of course, as usual, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to continue on with the unusual instruments with jazz music theme and check out another special selection. So until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.